By the way, Vendetta, one thing I want to ask you about like the Nordic lands as well is Richard told me as well. Like, here's the difference. At the American ones, you have to remember, this is another thing that was very weird for me as an adult. Because what's weird about the UK is we never had like a stigma about alcohol. I realise now the rest of this sentence is going to sound ridiculous because we all just were drinking loads of it at 15 in like, you know, in a park with cider or having a party. Yeah, that actually sounds bad when I say it like that. I realise we didn't have a problem with alcohol, Moses. We were all drunk when we were 15 years old.
We were drunk for 6 years by now.
But remember, if you go to America, you have to be 21.
Yeah.
21! Not 18 even. Wasn't it actually 21 you had to be to drink alcohol?
21. And
so at the time, like the joke was, it was like I arrived in America, like, you can't have a drink, sir. Like, oh, okay. And so obviously then it would just be all people with, you know, the fifth of vodka in the hotel room. So even then it was sort of like you were out of sight. I've heard at the Nordic lands, they would just do stuff like, they'd either have a bar sometimes at the venue and people just drinking beer the whole time, or they'd just get like a whole table, like one of those like CPL tables, and they just fill it with like 80 pints of beer or lager, and then everyone's just drinking that all night long, like the whole time. I've heard the Nordic lads were mad for that shit, mate.
Oh yeah, like especially the Danish ones. Like Danish ones are the prime ones.
Oh right,
because they had a lower drinking age as well.
Well, they are the best Counter-Strike country we have, so maybe they're onto something.
Might be something to it. Because
I think Config was born in the wrong time. You know, if he'd have been born in like 2005, he'd be the MVP and, you know, having fun. What can I say? Yeah. Shout out Config.
It wasn't that common in Norway specifically, though. Probably because, again, though we have strict like regulations for alcohol, etc.
And it's so fucking expensive.
Like, and it's so exactly.
Oh,
like, we already have like a land budget of about $25, right? So you can't spend all that.
No beers in the bomb shelters.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, the worst ever as well was also when, like you say, in the days when you just don't have spare money, you just have the money you've saved. So then you'd have that thing where it's like, you know, you're not buying beers from the event because they cost money. So it's like right now we're just having to pass around a bottle of, what is it, peach schnapps or something. You just be like, drink, or some like, you know, some coconut rum or something. Like, what the fuck is this? Like, shut up and drink it. All right, bloody hell. It's just like, suffering.
The classic thing that would go around on, especially the Danish event, was something called fisk. Basically fish, which is like this licorice.
Oh, isn't that disgusting? Isn't that the one that's like, isn't it like a salty licorice drink or something?
Yes, exactly. So you have that like...
What is wrong with you people?
Oh, dude, it's vile.
By the way, here's how I can tell you that's a bad idea. Because when I was in Finland, I once went to a club where one of the like novelties was you could get like licorice flavored vodka.
Yeah,
that sounded like a good idea, right? Until I was throwing up, and then it looked like, you know, in the X-Files where that black goo would like take over. Dude, I was throwing up just black spew out.
Dude, it's alien blood.
And you're drunk, so you just be thinking like, what the fuck's... Is that like my liver or something exploded? What's going on now? It was wild, mate. And also, you know what as well, Buzz? The other problem about being sick is obviously it comes to you get all the sense through your nose and everything. You don't want to have salty, sour licorice smell there. Like, it's even worse.
Burning out of your sinuses.
Oh, mate.
I don't know about you guys, but like for us, our cough medicine when we were kids in the Nordic, it tastes exactly like that. So
right.
we're kind of used to.
Oh, that's the joke that you're used to it. That right? I see. Now it's alcoholic.
Whole new meaning to Grandpa's old cough medicine.
Exactly.
Whole new meaning.
Right,
dude. I mean, look. As much as we painted such a beautiful picture of these old school lands, like when the games are done or you were eliminated, the tournament was over. It was probably like the most social experience anyone had at that point in time. Like there was something really cool because at the end of the event, you would just go fucking chill and randomly. Like if you were part of the cool kids club who was like good at Counter-Strike, you'd be hanging out with all the legends from Europe and you'd be having a beer. It's where I had my first snooze ever in my life and it knocked me on my fucking ass. I thought my neck turned into rubber at that point in my life. But, you know, had my first drink at a CPL, you know, all that kind of stuff. Like it was like a social experience for gamers who don't normally have social experiences because that's the only environment that they ever really felt comfortable in was amongst other gamers. So there was that cool social element of it too. I remember, you know, one of the other foods we had at the CPLs, Duncan, remember Texas has the largest Hooters in the entire world. So a lot of people went to that Hooters.
And by the way, here's the other thing as well. Remember, that's another thing that for obvious reasons with social dynamics has sort of had to degrade over time, hasn't it? Back then, it was exactly the ridiculous dream you'd want of a Hooters, Moses. Like you go there and, oh yes, you are seeing some large mammaries flopping about in a shirt. You are just like, I'll have the wings, I guess. Like fucking hell, it was crazy back then. And I'll tell you what, those girls, listen, one, they knew what they were doing, but two, they were making so much in tips, it was mental. Because you can imagine people just fucking cashing out. Because that was like that was actually sort of like a novelty back then, wasn't it? Of that bar, yeah.
Anytime you went there with someone from CPL, it was actually like the scene from The Office. It was actually like that really cringe, exactly. Michael Scott office scene. You were just like, but like nobody even realized that was awkward. It was just ridiculous. But everyone fucking loved it. Everyone. That was like a yearly tradition. And we'll just let the silence speak everything for the great giant Hooters restaurant of Dallas, Texas.
You know, one thing I always thought was sad though is that this is actually one thing a lot of people don't know about CS 1.6 is it wasn't until way later, almost like I'd say like maybe 4 or 5 years later, that there were like NA teams that would come to Europe. Because before it was like we all came to America and the sponsored teams. But unless you really were like maybe Team 3D or maybe like eventually like one other like I don't know, Zex or something. There's only 1 or 2 teams ever did the opposite, went to Europe and had like their own experience, like ESWC or whatever maybe. So I always felt like that was the sad thing. Unlike in CSGO, you didn't have like the full crossover. It was more like we all came to America, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be like super ignorant about it because I don't know how much money the European orgs had back then, but like, and I didn't even have orgs that were structured as a business. It was we're picking like a clan tag. I think 3D, which was born out of X3, was like the first actual organization that had sponsors and that had funding. United 5 that I played on was the second one because Craig from 3D Torbil helped us get those sponsors. And I think at that time, this was like 2004, I want to say. At that time, it was like they were giving us like $6,000 a year split into 2 payments, but we had to pay the money up front and then invoice for it later. Right. So I mean, we just you know, in any way. But yeah, that was the big reason at the time was just like we didn't have that business side of things like set up in any meaningful way. And I don't know how much the orgs paid to get their teams to CPL. I don't know if it was 100% or just most of it or anything like that. But yeah, it just wasn't there. And also, I mean, in those early days too, I think there was really only one event that Americans looked at in Europe that was like, we want to go to it, and it was Jönköping. It was like the DreamHack Winter, and Jönköping was like the one big event I feel like that Europe had that really attracted North American teams. Everything else was still in kind of its small, more regional phases, as far as I recall. But yeah, I mean, we just simply couldn't make the trip for a long time until ESWC started popping up and getting started, and then you could win. Like if you won the ESWC America, they would fly you out to Paris for it. But those were really the only opportunities that we kind of had.
I guess it kind of changed a little bit later on when you had CPL tours, right?
Yeah, when they started doing the world tour. Yeah, when they started doing the world tour of CPL, which was 2006, and they had like a stop in South America, a couple in Europe, I think, and then the main one was always in North America as like the actual championship for it.
Yeah.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.